Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Laura Fernandez, who is the visionary behind Front Yard Foods in South Carolina. Laura's journey began with a simple garden at the age of 12 and has blossomed into a mission to reconnect people with their food through personalized garden designs, educational courses, and a passion for community-driven sustainability. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So how did you get started in being interested in plants?
Oh man, the day I was born, I suppose. I've always loved plants, loved being outside. My mom was a fairly kind of standard Southern gardener. I remember planting bulbs out with her as a very young child and just being amazed that they came up every year. We did the kind of typical, pansies in the winter and spring flowers. And I just always loved it. But I started being really interested in growing food when I was about 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you started growing food, did you actually at that point like have your own garden or start growing in pots or?
Yeah. So as the story goes, I just kind of randomly one day told my mom, hey, I want to garden. I want to grow food. And she wasn't super familiar. So she had her father, so my grandfather, come over and he tilled up a little spot in our backyard. I would guess now looking back, it was probably like a 10 by 10 area, but it felt ginormous for a youngster. And I very distinctly remember mounding up the soil for the squash and running twine for the beans to climb up and planting tomatoes with him. It's a very clear memory. It was a really big time for me. And then we got it going. The first couple of weeks were great. But, as a 12-year-old in Georgia in hot summer, I didn't have any clue of what I was doing. So it didn't maybe produce what it could have, but it did produce a little seed inside of me that's just continued to be just wowed by food growing and that understanding of the human connection back to the soil. It's, I have really only truly been a major food grower for about the past 10 years, but I've, ever since that garden with my grandfather, I have steadily grown something. And so it's just been a great part of my life.
And then you also had an experience in your 20s where you're able to spend time in Italy. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I have kind of these spots in my life where I look back and I realize they were all adding up to what I do now. And I went to Italy for grad school. I went to study Renaissance art, but what I really got a lesson on was food and what it might look like to source food locally daily, right? Not just a Saturday farmer's market, but where that is just part of the culture that you go down in the morning and you get fresh meat from the butcher coming or, from the farm coming in, or fruits and veggies or whatever they are. And you're eating seasonally and extremely fresh. And that's not, it's not a big deal. It's normalized. And I came home with a deep respect for that type of food culture and really wanting to figure out how to do that here. I was in my 20s and, fresh out of school and trying to get a job going and all of those things. But it was a really important part of my life to see what a different kind of culture could look like. And I've been pretty blessed. I've got to travel a lot. And I will say, as much as I love this country, we kind of, I think we're missing the boat on the availability of fresh food. And we do so many things well. And there's a lot of us they're making big efforts to change that. And so, I hope to be a part of this, at least a small part of that.
Yeah. There's something different about really good, really fresh food. And it's just a whole nother level of culinary delight.
Absolutely. Well, and health. too. I mean, I think it's
Yes.
all so linked. I don't think you can talk with about one without the other.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about then how Front Yard Foods got started.
So, it was I think so many of us that are kind of entrepreneurs or small business or whatever you want to label us, I think they all start years before they actually become anything. And the idea came to me. I love to cook. I like the link between growing and cooking, and that's really a big part of Front Yard Foods. But what I thought about years ago wouldn't it be cool if I could just do like front yard pantry or something, and once a week kind of say, hey, this is what I'm cooking up, this is what you could come and pick up. And that was kind of this little idea that I had, and then it just kept going. And we moved into our house, it'll be 5 years ago this Christmas, and immediately started putting in fruit trees and berry bushes and plotting out the garden. And I was surprised by how many people were interested in our neighborhood of what we were doing. And then 2020 hit. We moved in December of 2019, and then 2020 hit. And we all know what happened then. But I got a call from a friend of mine who said, hey, don't you know how to grow tomatoes? And I laughed and I said, well, absolutely. And she said, would you show me how? And it just kind of spiraled from there. I put together a little class, how to grow fall uh, roots and brassicas. And I could not believe how many people signed up and showed up. And so that eventually led me to write the veggie course, which I teach twice a year. It's a 3-month course, and it's everything from seed starting to what to do with your harvest. I teach it in the fall and in the spring, and it just kept going from there. And now I go out to people's homes, look at their space. Some people just kind of want to say, hey, this hasn't gone quite right. What might I change? And some people are at the very beginning. I was meeting with a woman this week who just bought an acre and a half, moved out of an apartment to this house with a little bit of property. And she's starting right at the beginning. So we kind of come in wherever you are and help people just get started and understand how important just the little steps can be.
Yeah, you more guide them on the journey.
Yes.
Very cool. So let's break this down. So you grow transplants, you teach classes, you do these sourdough classes as well. And then you also do like, you almost like garden for people. What would you say kind of like was your biggest surprise in like how your business has grown?
I think my biggest surprise, and I don't know if it would be necessarily a surprise, but I told my husband the other day, I'd had several really positive, excited clients call me over the course of the afternoon, and just with what they felt like were some big wins. And I got off the phone and I was talking to him, and I said, I don't think I'm in the gardening business. I think I'm in the encouragement business. I think that I'm just somebody who is kind of giving people permission to step outside the box and do something different. And I thought my job would be very much like, you plant this with this type of soil, you water it X amount of times, you get this product. And really, it's just telling people you can do this. Like, you're so much more capable than you've been led to believe. And in my opinion, we've been raised in this culture where unless you purchase it, it doesn't have much value. And I really want to swing the pendulum back the other way and be like, no, what you create is the most valuable, and how important that is. And so I think I've been surprised that it's been much less about fundamentals and much more about meeting people where they are.
Something you said there too, that what we create is worth money. I mean, how many people do you know who grow a garden and then just give away the tomatoes or give away the beans, when every farmer is going to charge for those, and people that do that at home really should realize the value of that, their time, their effort, what they put into that.
Yeah. And and whether they sell it or whether they keep it, like, I teach canning and preserving because I want people to be able to eat year round. And we do a lot of community focused things. And so I do encourage people, hey, if you have an abundance of something, at least trade it,
Yeah.
and understand the value that you have put in it. but I think the best stories are when people say, hey, I grew this. And then we all sat down at the kitchen, at the dinner table and ate together.
Yeah.
Actually had a gentleman stop me at Whole Foods and he said, are you the girl that teaches the veggie classes? And I said, I am. He said, my wife took your class and it's been life-changing for our family. And I said, well, please tell me more. And he said, she's out there and she's growing this thing and she's feeling accomplished. And we all sat down and ate, dinner with broccoli from the garden. And to see her be able to express her love for us in that way was so special. And I was really moved by that because it's such a wonderful gift to be able to do that. But I didn't think about that when I started this business.
Yeah. So of your like 4 areas or 5 areas, what is the biggest one? Is it the transplants or is it the gardening class?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess it depends on whether you mean what's the biggest for the bottom line or what's the biggest. The biggest bottom line is 100% the garden installations. Okay. That's really what keeps the company afloat. I mean, they're all money makers. I've dropped some things, to be honest, that didn't bring in money, that really weren't, that I wasn't excited about, and they weren't profitable. And so, obviously we're going to drop that. And I think a lot of small business owners find themselves just, they start and they just throw everything at the wall to see what sticks.
Correct.
So yes. I've definitely removed some of those things and tried to increase. I didn't start out doing a lot of plant starts, but I realized that profit margin was going to be very high for me, especially because I was purchasing so many 4 installations that if I'm already growing those, that's just, that's a much higher margin for me. But the garden installations are the big ticket items for us.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what does the average garden installation look like? Is it like 2 raised beds? Is it an entire backyard? What are they looking for?
It definitely varies. I would say, on average, it's 3 to 4 raised beds, but I've done as many as 14. This was actually a very cool project. She had an old tennis court, and it was unusable as a tennis court, but it made the perfect space for a raised bed garden. And we did those really high and large because there wasn't the drainage of the soil and there wasn't everything underneath. And we talked about what that would look like going forward as far as the capacity of that soil. But and I've done everything as small as just really help some people tuck some things in to their walk in front of their house. We've just snuck a cabbage here or put a basil plant there. So it varies pretty dramatically, but I would say on average it's 3 to 4 raised beds.
And I'm assuming like during the pandemic, there really wasn't a need for marketing, but I'm assuming now, have you just built up your clientele, or what do you focus on now to get the word out?
I go to farmers markets. That's really helpful. I'm a regular at a couple of our different local farmers markets. And so I get to meet people, and oftentimes, they won't call for several weeks, but they'll shoot me an email and say, hey, I met you at such and such market. So for me, I'm kind of an extrovert and I like to be with people. And so for me, being in a booth and talking or being at events is really probably the main way that I attract clientele. I have a social media presence, I have a website, all of those things, but either word of mouth or the farmers markets are really what has led me to my businesses.
Okay. So at the farmers markets, you're typically selling plants in season, and then like middle of the summer, you're just selling other plants.
Yeah. So everything that I sell has to fit into the criteria that it's either an edible plant, medicinal plant, or it's specifically attractive to pollinators or just highly pollinator friendly, I guess is a better way to put it. And that it is appropriate for that season. There's nothing that frustrates more than going to a big box store and I live in South Carolina and seeing broccoli for sale in June. Someone is going to purchase that, it's going to fail, and they are going to suddenly decide they're a bad gardener. So everything that I sell is going to live right then. And that's also challenging education wise. I had a bunch of stuff set up this past week. And everybody's like, oh, do I need to take that rosemary inside? Do I need to take such and such inside? And I'm like, no, they're all, cold hardy for our area anyway. Certainly not everywhere, but for where we are. And that's a really important piece of it for me, is to educate people on what grows when and the best techniques to get it to produce.
And you mix a lot of different things in your garden too, because I'm looking at, you've got some pots in there that have the herbs, and then some of the raised beds, you've got, different things, but on the edges, you're doing more flowers.
Sure. Yeah, I try to do a little bit of everything. I would say my front yard is pretty messy because I test a lot, right? I don't want to teach anything that I haven't tried. I want to try to speak based on my own experiences with a particular plant. And so it can look like a little bit of a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
But I love it, and I'm always trying something new. We just did a big clear out. We actually took out a number of the raised beds that are out there, created a much larger in-ground area, which I'm excited about. And I have 2 greenhouses in the back. I have kind of an annual greenhouse that is heated and cooled properly, and then I have a like a cattle panel, just plastic coated greenhouse. It just adds a little bit of protection in the frost, but it's not heated in there.
And your transplant house, is that the one made out of windows?
Yes, I use them both for transplants, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a cool house.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the business side of this. It's just you who does this, or do you have people that help you with installs? Or
I do. I'm very fortunate. I have a young woman named Leslie that works for me. I have to come up with a better term than assistant, because I think I'd fall apart if she were not here. And she does a little bit of everything. This company has its reach in a lot of different areas. And so, you just never know what's going to happen. And she's very good at pivoting. She's been with me for about a year, and she does a lot of the grunt work and a lot of behind the scenes things as well. I often enlist my son, and lucky for me, he is 16 and on the football team. So he knows lots of really strong young men. So my Saturdays during the school year, anyway, my Saturdays are nice because they'll come out and throw mulch and do some of the things that I need done. And then, if it gets too much, I also enlist my husband. So it's still very much a family operation. So that's really it. I would love to be able to expand, and I hope by next year that I'm able to do that. But I feel very blessed that I even have one person on the payroll. That was a big step forward for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Leslie, then, how did you find her? Was she a former student, or?
Actually, she was a friend of a friend. We met that way. She just kind of walked over to the room and we started talking, and our interests just aligned. And she was looking for some work, and I said, hey, I don't know how you feel about being outside, but I've got this big job coming up. And she came, and like day one, we just it worked. And she's learned a lot, and she's very patient. I can be a little bit I can be tough sometimes. She's very patient and very willing to learn, and she's really creative, and so it's somebody that I can bounce ideas off of. So I just got really lucky. I wish I had some great story, but it just happened. And I was willing to ask her, and she was willing to say yes, and it just worked out really beautifully.
Yeah, finding that right person, especially that first hire, is such a key aspect. Once you start adding more and more people, they don't have to be quite as good a fit because there's more people to work with them. But right at the beginning, it's got to be just the right person.
Yeah, I got extremely lucky. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the backside of the business. Like, are you using QuickBooks, or how do you run all your books for the business?
So I will say this was a big learning curve for me, and I wish I had gotten it a little more organized early on. So I would say to anyone who's starting out, like, do this up front. But I do use QuickBooks, and I have someone that helps me with it, just because the first year the first couple of years I tried to do taxes, it was a disaster with me and spreadsheets. And I mean, it was days on end of just endless receipts and things. So I'm much more organized this year, and I do use QuickBooks, and I have someone that will help me go over all of that. Numbers are not my strong suit, but I have learned that it doesn't matter. I have to do it, and I've got to stay organized. And so that's something that's really been a new practice for me.
Mm-hmm. And then what kind of vehicles do you need for this business?
My poor car is so trashed. I have a work truck. I just have an old Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, and she is the workhorse of everything. And then I have a large SUV that we carry a lot of plants in. My husband also has a pickup if I can't handle everything in the Toyota. But that's really, we kind of are on a wing and a prayer. I have some big events that I do, and so I have to look at whether I want to rent a car. I do Rory Feek's Homestead Festival in June. And this past year, we took 2 vehicles, but this year we're looking at renting a box truck. Just, it was really tough squeezing everything in. And I had a lot of plant damage when we got there. And
gotcha.
so it's something you have to consider. And, a plant for 7, 8, 9 hours in a car bent over is just not going to be beneficial.
Correct.
So, so that's kind of new for this year, us looking into the vehicle situation. We actually, the SUV that I bought was hilarious. I didn't care about the engine. We just kept measuring the the length and the width of the inside. The guy thought we were crazy, but
will it fit?
Yeah, will it fit? And and can I fit an 8-foot table for markets and all of those things that a lot of people would not think about when they're purchasing a vehicle.
Yeah, we're starting to do more festivals and shows too, and we're looking at one of those Sprinter vans, and obviously those things are not cheap, but it would allow us to do a lot of things locally that we haven't been able to do so far, and we wouldn't have to borrow our friend's truck anymore, because we actually don't have a pickup for the farm, and everyone laughs at us, but I have a father-in-law and a uncle with nice pickups, and then a friend that has a nice pickup, so I just don't need it.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's a really valuable point. Like, only have what you need. There's a lot of things in this business that people have that, you were talking about a tractor earlier. That's just not something I need. I consider myself an urban farmer, but I'm just not at a place where some of the large equipment is going to be necessary for me. I hope to grow into that space at some point. But yeah, we make do with what we have.
Do you even have like a BCS, like a small walking tractor?
No, I don't have anything like that.
Okay. So you basically, your beds are typically hand dug or hand managed.
Oh yeah. Everything is done by hand. Yep.
Okay. Very cool. So then what would you say, like when you're sharing your customer stories, do you try to talk about what your customers are doing on like your Instagram or Facebook at all?
Sometimes I'll share, like some progress pictures, especially with some of our really big jobs. And it just kind of depends on the client too. Sometimes they get excited when I'm taking pictures and they're like, "Oh, are you going to share that on your social media?" And so then I definitely want to make sure that I do, because I can tell that they're excited about it. The website, I have been working really hard on our website the last, I guess, about 3 months. And so we are actually designing a page where you can go on and see the designs. You can see the before pictures. You can see my sketches and my renderings for the designs. And then you can see what they look like after. So hopefully in the next several weeks, that'll be part of the website as well.
Very cool. And what software do you use for those designs?
Just me, myself, and my pencils. I was a studio art major, and I learned how to I took a landscape architect class. I did not go in that direction, oddly enough, but so I just do everything by hand. I guess I'm kind of old school in that way. I've looked at a couple of software designing programs. I just haven't found any that I really like.
Yeah. Well, if you've got that experience to do it by hand, why change?
Yeah.
I guess.
I
Yeah.
would like to get some sort of nice large scanner though, to actually be able to put them onto the computer. I think that would be really helpful. That might be a future purchase.
Yeah. Corinna, we all love a good acronym, and we've got a couple here today, the AOV versus LCV. All right, what are we talking about?
So AOV stands for average order value, and LCV stands for lifetime customer value. These are two data metrics that you should absolutely be tracking in your business. And I didn't know about these until a few years ago. And it's been a game changer now that I'm studying them and trying to get them higher. So the average order value, it's tracking the average dollar amount that's spent each time a customer places an order, right, at the point of sale. So if your average client is spending $20 with you whenever they come to the farmer's market, that's just a good number to know. The higher you can get that average order value in general for all of your customers, the more revenue you're going to make. And so we can try to increase the average order value by trying to get people to buy one more thing or put one more thing into their cart, right? So that's one way we can grow our revenue. When we know what that AOV is, then we can make business decisions. We can kind of make income projections for the next year, or we can set goals for how to increase our revenue. The lifetime customer value is the amount of revenue that's generated by the average client over the entire lifetime with your business. So the way that you figure out what this is you try to track what does the average customer spend in 1 year with you, and then you multiply that by the average number of years that a customer is with you. And that's usually a really high number. Like for us, when I kind of did the math and saw that, my client Tracy is bringing in over $10,000 by the time she's done with our farm, all of a sudden I had a completely different perspective on how much I was willing to spend to acquire that customer in the first place. So I think this is a really powerful metric to become aware of.
Well, and I think too, with that second one is lifetime customer values. There's certain people that you're going to give a little bit of special treatment to. Like maybe when they show up, you're going to say, hey, you know what? I was thinking of you this week. Here's a flower or something like that. Because again, they're spending the larger amounts, and you are going to work a little bit harder to make sure that they are very happy. And that's something too, is that we've noticed with increasing our diversity is one of the easiest ways to up our average spend per visit. And so, now that we're offering, breads and milk and meat and stuff like that, obviously we're not producing those. We're just adding those to our store. But I think that's a great way to up your average value. You can also just grow more different types of products, but that also gets to be a more challenge in production. So
yeah,
again,
one of my best tips that I've recently learned is that I like to drop a new product into the online store like on the second day. So I don't release it with everything else at first. I announce that I've added something in, and it causes all of those buyers to go back again and buy that product. And while they're there, they usually add in one or two other things from the cart. So that's another kind of little trick you can try to increase the number of times that they frequent your store. That will also increase your lifetime customer value.
Interesting. We'll have to try that one because I haven't tried that one yet. But very cool.
If you want more farm marketing tips like this, check out my top rated weekly show, the My Digital Farmer podcast. I teach marketing concepts and interview lots of farmers to find out what's working and not working in farm marketing to help you find more customers, increase your sales, and build a strong brand for your farm. Look for the My Digital Farmer podcast on your favorite podcast app.
If you could go over and start the business over again, what would you say you'd do differently?
That's a great question. I don't want to say I wouldn't change anything because what I've done has been perfect, but I'm really happy with where we are. And I feel like all those steps have kind of led me that way. I think if I could go over again, I would have just been more organized up front and a little bit less dreamy and romantic about it.
Okay.
Where it was, and I got a little bit more into the nitty gritty of the business aspect of it, which oddly I really enjoy. I was staying away from those types of things. I was like, oh, I don't want to get bogged down, but I love pulling reports and seeing what's going on and seeing where our strengths are and where we could tighten things up. Because overall it's going to make the company better. So I think if I had to answer that question, it would say, to be a dreamer and to be excited, but to also look at it from someone who wants a successful operation.
Absolutely. And in your mind, what does a successful operation look like?
Well, money in the bank.
Yeah,
This is the simple answer, but that we can do what we need to do. That if I need to hire somebody for a job, I'm not sweating it. That that our clients are pleased with the output, that the greenhouse is producing good quality plants that we can stand behind, that we're able to continue to expand. My goal in the next 3 or 4 years is to have a freestanding building that's, that I'm not working out of my house, that we can really grow into something. And so I think just to be successful along the way is to be continuing to move in that direction. And I think it also looks like letting go of things that aren't serving a purpose for us too, and being able to understand the difference.
Yeah. What do you see in your future? Do you see just to continue to do the same thing? Do you feel like there's a part of your business that will continue to expand faster than the rest?
Yeah, I think I've been really surprised by the plant sales. That was a really small, just not even idea, little notion that I had. One of the events, the markets that I went to, I had, because I originally got into the markets and the events just to be out there and to tell people what we did, to talk about my classes and to tell them we would come out to their gardens. It wasn't ever about selling anything. And I had a bunch of plants that I had not planted out in my own garden. And so I just stuck them in the car with me and I took them to the farmer's market and they sold in not even 30 minutes. And I was like, whoa. And so I thought, well, maybe I should try this. And so in the last 18 months, that has just skyrocketed. And people are calling and meeting me places and because they want a good quality plant that's been started here in South Carolina, that, I'm not certified organic, and nor do I think I ever will be, but I use only organic practices. And I also offer plants that are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more diversity, heirloom quality and things like that. So that's definitely a part of the business that I am loving and I'm enjoying, but I didn't know would be such a big part of it at the beginning.
Yeah. And then you do a fair amount of unusual plants too. You don't just do your tomatoes and peppers. You have things like olives and figs and all of that.
Yeah. And pomegranates. I do blueberry, blackberry, raspberries. We do goji berries. We do all kinds of different herbs. The tomatoes, the plants that I sell are going to be yellows and oranges and striped and all kinds of fun things. I do Tulsi, which people love and, have a hard time finding starts for. We sell a lot of calendula and edible flowers. Yeah, we try to do just a little bit of the more unusual things.
Yeah. Now with a lot of those like blueberries and stuff, is that where you're bringing in bare root and potting up, or you're actually taking cuttings?
Both, just depending on what they are.
Yeah. Some of them are just super easy to do cuttings and some of them are not.
Right. Like we just got in a ton of strawberries, but I actually got those from bare root from a grower that I know. So we potted up, oh my gosh, so many strawberries. And we'll have those ready. But we kind of do those throughout the year because we're lucky here. We can grow just about 365 days a year here. So it's nice.
Yeah, you guys are pretty warm down there.
Yes, we are. It does make my job easier. I will say that.
Yes. I mean, I guess I would say in the summer, it's a lot harder to keep things alive because it's so hot and humid and nasty. But you almost have like a 3 season. You have like a fall, winter, spring is really where it's at.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, the olive tree I got from you is still sitting in the bench in the greenhouse. I ended up getting a bunch of sea berries from Oregon. So there's now with the sea berries and the autumn olives that I have in
Nice.
there. So
Very nice.
yeah. Yeah, we just picked up additional 6 acres of land to lease. So I'm still trying to figure out where things are going. It's an 8-year lease, so we can actually put some short-lived perennials on it.
Nice.
So we'll definitely be moving our comfrey production over there because we produce a tremendous amount of comfrey root that we ship all over the nation. And yeah, that needs to go over there because we're going to have rotation here on the farm for it.
Yeah, comfrey is, I get asked, I don't produce currently any comfrey, and I get asked about that all the time. It might be something that we have to check out, but
yes. Yeah, you just need a 100-pack. And your markup on that is incredible. I mean, we sell at the farm store with farm market here. We sell like a 1 gallon for like 15 or 20 bucks.
oh wow.
Yeah, very easily. People have no problem at all paying that
Wow.
because it takes 3-4 weeks and those things just explode right up and look like a full 1 gallon.
Wow, that's awesome.
So. All right. What would you say to someone who's, starting down this journey for the first time?
I would say you follow your passion, like let yourself dream, without stifling yourself at the beginning, at least. Maybe you have to tailor things as you go along. But I do think the reason that I've been successful is because I just allowed myself to fully walk into what I was excited about.
Mm-hmm.
But like I mentioned earlier, also, marrying that with a business mind. I think you can be too structured in the business area and you lose your passion, right? So then you're not really doing anything that excites you. And so your creativity is going to die. Or you can be on the other end where you're just being creative and excited and, oh, who cares? We'll sell it for this or we'll sell it for that, right? And then you end up kind of taking a nosedive. And so just being able to bring those two things together. But there's such a market for food growing. And, I'm a little bit different because I don't sell the product of the plants, right? I'm not at the farmer's market selling the tomato. And I started the markets thinking that was who I was, right? Or having that as my understanding and really having to curtail that and realize like I'm showing up very differently at these markets. And just seasonally, my product is going to look very different than selling the actual tomato. So I think it's finding your own niche and finding what is unique about your business and exploring and then exploiting that.
Yeah. And I think you're opening up a whole new part of farming and just agriculture that has long been relegated to the large nursery that doesn't have that personal touch. So, anyone can compete with Lowe's because Lowe's has no clue what they're selling.
Right.
So, yeah, I've happened to if we can Lowe's once in a while for their 75% off corner because I know I can save some of the stuff they pretty much throw away.
I know, it's so sad. Oh my gosh. My husband was just rolled his eyes at me one day because I was out there with the hose, like watering plants because, in the middle of the summer, you go over there and nobody cares. Nobody's doing anything to help those poor plants.
Yes. Yeah. I had one that I think they were 50% off. I took them up front and I crackled the top and basically, and I was like, can I get more? And she's like, okay, fine. $10 each. But I knew that down at the base of the plant, it had green wood. So I knew I could save it.
Right.
And we did. Right. So, but it's just funny. Yeah.
But yeah, I want to let everyone know like that all their efforts are valid and worthy. And, I love when people have 40 acres that they're able to farm. But the reality is most people are not there. And some people have no desire to get there. right?
Mhm.
So if we can connect to someone who's in a a regular old subdivision or in an apartment on a balcony and let them feel like what they're doing is valid because it is,
Mhm.
then we're going to change the dynamic of our food system. We're going to change the dynamic and the culture that we think about food,
Mhm.
and that we have around food. And that ultimately is my goal. It's for
Yeah.
people, not just to put rosemary in the ground, but to cut it and bring it into their kitchen and see what they can do with it. And
Mhm.
just to complete that circle.
Yeah. And create a recipe with it, create some
Mm-hmm.
memories with your family with it.
Yeah.
'Cause I think you're right, is that yes, the 40-acre farmers are great and the 1,000-acre farms are great, but I think the real change can happen at the quarter acre, the 10th of an acre, the balcony,
Yeah.
pot.
Well, and when you grow something, even on a tiny scale, you immediately, well, in my opinion, immediately have more respect for those on the 40 acres and the 1,000 acres because
Mhm.
you start to have an understanding and a link to the work that goes into that. When you are, you just, your food becomes more valuable. And so when you go to the farmer's market, even if you're not growing it, but you can ask questions to the farmer, you can understand how they got that tomato to the table, and you value it, and you go home and you can make a recipe and enjoy it with your family with a whole different perspective
Mhm.
on it, just because you decided to grow one in a 5-gallon bucket. And that may seem really simplistic, but ultimately I think there's a lot of truth to it.
Mhm. No, absolutely. You're right. That respect that now I have done it once. I respect what goes into creating that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time, and
Thank
excited
you.
about what you're up to and all the change you're making in your little part of the world.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me on. It was nice talking to you.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.